Neighbor from hell tried to claim our home piece by piece, but her greed triggered consequences that cost her everything. I'm a pretty private guy, not the kind who airs his business online. But after everything that happened, after months of stress, threats, and sleepless nights, I need to get this off my chest. This is the story of how my wife and I almost lost our home. Not to a fire or foreclosure, but to a woman next door who believed lies louder than truth, and paperwork optional. My name's Mark. I'm in my early 40s, married to my wife Laura, for 14 years. No kids yet, just us, our dog, and the house we worked our entire adult lives to afford. We bought it 8 years ago. Quiet suburban street, big trees, friendly waves, the kind of neighborhood where people bring casseroles when someone moves in and complain about lawn lengths behind closed doors. Everything was fine, until Diane moved in next door. At first, she seemed harmless, mid-50s, always overdressed for yard work. The kind of woman who spoke in long sighs and passive-aggressive smiles. She introduced herself the week after moving in. I'm just so relieved to be around people who care about property values, she said, glancing at our lawn like she was grading it. I laughed it off. That was mistake number 1. Started small. A note taped to our mailbox about our trash cans being too close to the curb. A complaint that our dog barked while squirrels existed. A suggestion that our fence was probably not exactly on the property line. That last one stuck with me. I checked the survey from when we bought the house. Everything was in order, but Diane didn't drop it. One afternoon, she knocked on our door holding printed satellite images like she was presenting evidence in court. "You see this?" she said, pointing. "That corner of your fence? It's on my land." I calmly told her she was mistaken and offered to show her the official survey. She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, those are wrong all the time." That was mistake number 2, hers. A week later, a city inspector showed up. Apparently, someone had reported our fence as an illegal structure encroaching on neighboring property. Guess who? The inspector was polite, professional, and after reviewing our documents, clearly confused why he was there. "You're well within your boundary," he said. "I'll note it as a false complaint." I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't, because what I didn't know then was that Diane wasn't trying to move our fence. She was building a case. 3 months later, we received a certified letter. I still remember Laura opening it at the kitchen counter, her face draining of color. The letter claimed that Diane had legal interest in a portion of our property, specifically the side yard and driveway. Her justification? She claimed adverse possession. If you don't know what that is, lucky you. I had to learn fast. In short, if someone openly, continuously, and hostilely uses land they don't own for a long enough period, they can try to claim ownership. Her argument that she and the previous owner of our house had been informally allowing her use of that space for over a decade, which was impossible because the previous owner was a retired couple who sold us the house directly. And Diane didn't live here then. But here's the thing. She had affidavits, handwritten statements from 2 people claiming she had maintained that land for years. I felt sick. One of the signatures stopped me cold. It belonged to Tom, the former owner of her house, a man I had met, a man who once told me he barely spoke to Diane when she moved in. So I called him, and when I explained what was happening, he went silent. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I never signed anything like that." That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was fraud. Diane began acting like she already owned the land. She parked her car halfway into our driveway, put flower pots along what she claimed was her edge, installed solar lights without permission. When I removed them, she screamed loud enough for half the block to hear. "You can't touch my property." I told her we'd handle everything through lawyers. She smiled. "Oh, I already am." 2 weeks later, we were served. She wasn't just claiming land. She was claiming damages. According to her filing, our illegal use of her property had caused her emotional distress, reduced her enjoyment of her home, and deprived her of rental income potential. She wanted compensation. 6 figures. Couldn't sleep. Laura started waking up with panic attacks. This was our home, the place we planned our future. and someone was trying to steal it with forged papers and confidence. Here's the thing Diane didn't know. I keep records. Not because I'm paranoid, because my dad taught me to. Old emails, photos, closing documents, and buried deep in a digital folder was something she never expected. A time-stamped photo from 8 years ago, taken the day we moved in. It clearly showed the property line markers, and Diane's driveway untouched, nowhere near our fence. At the time, it felt like a small win. What I didn't realize yet was that this photo would do more than defend us. It would eventually cost her everything. But that didn't happen yet, because Diane had one more move. Didn't tell Laura about Tom right away. Not because I was hiding anything from her, but because I needed to be absolutely sure before I let the weight of it land on both of us. We were already walking around the house like it was made of glass, afraid any sudden move would shatter what little calm we had left. But the next morning, when I watched Diane casually watering our side yard like she owned it, something inside me snapped. I told Laura everything. She listened quietly, arms crossed, jaw tight. When I finished, she didn't cry. She didn't panic. She said, "So she forged documents." I nodded. "Then this isn't a property dispute," she said. "It's a crime." That was the first time in weeks I felt a flicker of relief. Our attorney, a calm, sharp woman named Michelle, agreed. "She's claiming adverse possession," Michelle said during our meeting, flipping through the paperwork. "But that requires uninterrupted, open use for a statutory period. Her timeline doesn't match the ownership records at all." She paused. "And if even one affidavit is forged, that changes everything." Michelle advised us to stay quiet. No confrontations. No social media. Let Diane dig her own hole. I wish I could say Diane made that difficult. She made it impossible. Within days, she escalated. She started telling neighbors that we were trying to steal her land, that we were new money bullies, pushing out an older woman who'd lived there forever. People I'd waved to for years suddenly avoided eye contact. One afternoon, I overheard her loudly talking on her phone in her driveway. "They think money makes them untouchable," she said. "But the law is on my side." She said it with absolute confidence. That was when I realized something chilling. She truly believed she was going to win. The first hearing was procedural. No arguments, just scheduling. But Diane showed up like it was a victory lap. She wore a tailored blazer, brought a thick binder, smiled at us across the room like she already had the keys. Her lawyer, a man named Gerald, shook my hand and said, "Unfortunate situation." Diane leaned in afterward and whispered, "You should have just moved the fence." I didn't respond, but I noticed something. Gerald never once looked surprised by anything Michelle said. He looked cautious. A week later, Michelle called me. "Mark," she said, "I need to ask you something important. Has Diane ever rented part of her property? Or talked about development?" "No," I said. "Why?" "Because she's claiming lost rental income for land she says you occupied." I laughed once, humorless. "That land is barely wide enough for a lawn chair." "That's what I thought," Michelle said. "But she submitted a preliminary plan. She emailed it to me. It was a sketch, not professionally drawn. No permits, no architect stamp, just a rough outline of a future accessory dwelling unit, placed almost entirely on our property." That was twist number 1 in part 2. She wasn't just trying to take land. She was trying to build on it. Laura stared at the screen when I showed her. "She planned this," she said. "All of it." Yes, she had. And she'd started years before we ever met her. Michelle dug deeper. Property tax records, permit requests, old complaints. And that's when we found it. 3 years before Diane moved in, she had filed an inquiry with the city about expanding usable lot size through boundary clarification. It had been denied because the property lines were clear. She had known from the beginning. The second twist came from an unexpected place. Her own lawyer. Michelle received an email late one night. No subject line, just a short message. "I may need to withdraw from representation. Please advise." The next day, Gerald filed a motion to withdraw from Diane's case. No explanation, just irreconcilable differences. Diane lost it. She stormed into our yard, screaming that we were intimidating her counsel. I calmly told her to leave. She didn't, so I called the police. And for the first time, an incident report existed. That report changed everything. Because once the police were involved, Michelle was able to formally request a forensic review of the affidavits, including Tom's. The handwriting didn't match, the signature was traced, and the notary didn't exist. When Diane was confronted with this during discovery, she didn't deny it. She blamed someone else. She claimed a friend helped her with the paperwork. Someone who knew how the system worked. That friend, as it turned out, was her cousin, a former paralegal with a suspended license and a history of similar assistance. That was when the tone shifted. The judge ordered an investigation. Diane's claim was no longer just civil. It was under review for fraud. And suddenly, the woman who had once smiled like she owned our future looked scared. But she wasn't done yet, because in part 3 she would make one last desperate move. One that backfired so badly, it turned her from aggressor to defendant overnight. And none of us saw it coming. I thought she was reckless, entitled, desperate. I was wrong. She was calculated. And the moment she realized her legal footing was crumbling, she stopped trying to win. She decided to burn everything down instead. The investigation was moving faster than anyone expected. The judge ordered a temporary injunction. Diane was prohibited from entering or modifying the disputed area. No parking, no landscaping, no maintenance. She was furious, but outwardly she went quiet. Too quiet. For the first time since this nightmare started, our street was peaceful. No yelling, no passive-aggressive garden projects, no muttered comments when we stepped outside. Laura said, "I don't like this." Neither did I, because people like Diane don't surrender. They wait. The unexpected twist in part 3 came on a Tuesday morning. I left early for work. Laura was home, taking a rare day off. Around 10 a.m., my phone rang. It was her. She didn't say hello. She said, "Mark, the house smells like gas." My stomach dropped. I told her to get out immediately, not to touch anything, not to turn on lights. Just leave. She did. Fire department, gas company, police. The entire block was evacuated. And when they traced the source, it led straight to the side of the house, near the disputed boundary. Someone had tampered with the gas line access valve. Not a leak from age. Not wear and tear. Deliberate. At first, I couldn't process it. This wasn't about property anymore. This was about safety. Lives. The fire marshal said it plainly. If Laura had lit a candle, turned on the stove, even clicked a light switch at the wrong moment, the house could have exploded. I felt sick. Laura sat on the curb wrapped in a blanket, shaking. And Diane? She stood across the street, arms folded, watching. Not concerned, not surprised. Watching. The police questioned everyone, including Diane. She denied everything, of course. Said she'd been inside all morning. Claimed she didn't even know where the gas access point was. Then one officer asked a simple question. "Did you install solar lights along that boundary last month?" She said yes. "Then you would have had to dig there." Silence. Here's the part no one expected. There was a camera, not ours. A city traffic camera mounted 2 houses down, angled just enough to catch part of the sidewalk and the edge of our yard. Michelle had requested footage earlier just in case. The timestamp showed Diane outside at 6:12 a.m. that morning, bending, reaching, standing up, looking around, then walking back into her house. That single clip ended the civil case. Immediately, the judge dismissed Diane's adverse possession claim with prejudice, meaning she could never bring it again. But that wasn't the twist. That was just the beginning. The real twist was what investigators found next. When the gas company inspected Diane's property, they discovered something alarming. Her own gas line had been modified, improperly, illegally, in a way that redirected pressure toward our side. It wasn't just tampering. It was intentional rerouting. The technician said he'd only seen something like that once before, in a case involving insurance fraud. That's when the investigation widened. Diane had filed a claim with her homeowner's insurance months earlier, claiming anticipated loss due to alleged boundary disputes. She had quietly increased her coverage and listed potential neighbor-caused damages. If our house had exploded, the payout would have been massive. I remember sitting in Michelle's office when she told us. Laura grabbed my hand so hard it hurt. "She could have killed us," Laura said. "Yes," Michelle replied, "and she would have blamed you." Diane was arrested 2 days later, not for the property dispute, for reckless endangerment, fraud, forgery, tampering with utilities. Her house was searched. They found drafts of legal complaints, fake letters, practice signatures, and a notebook with our address written over and over, with dollar amounts, with the words, "They'll settle." The criminal case moved quickly, because unlike civil court, criminal court doesn't care about stubborn neighbors, cares about intent and consequences. By the end of part 3, Diane wasn't fighting us anymore. She was fighting the state, and the bill she was about to face, it hadn't even been calculated yet. The street felt different after Diane was taken away. Not quieter, heavier. Police tape came down, the fire trucks left, and life technically resumed, but none of us were the same. Laura and I stayed with friends for a week because neither of us could sleep in the house. Every hiss of air, every creak, sent my heart racing. When we finally came back, I walked the perimeter of our property like a guard on night duty. I checked doors twice, sometimes 3 times. I hated that fear had followed us home, but I couldn't pretend it hadn't earned its place. Then the bills started arriving. Not ours, hers. The first notice came from the gas company. Emergency response fees, line repair, hazard mitigation, just over $38,000. Then the city sent theirs. Code violations, illegal modifications, false reports that triggered inspections and evacuations. Another $52,000. Diane's insurance company followed next. They denied her claim, obviously, but didn't stop there. They cited attempted fraud and demanded repayment for investigative costs, legal review, and policy cancellation penalties. $117,000. And it kept going. Court costs from the dismissed civil case, expert witness fees, forensic handwriting analysis, environmental safety assessments. By the time Michelle tallied everything, the number made my head spin. Just under $300,000. And that didn't even include potential criminal restitution. Diane's house went up for sale while she was out on bail. Not by choice. A lien had been placed on the property. Multiple ones. The for sale sign stood crooked on her lawn, faded and sad, like it knew no one was coming to save it. Laura stood beside me one evening, arms wrapped around herself, staring at it. "I don't feel relieved," she said quietly. "Neither do I," I replied, and that surprised me. I thought justice would feel cleaner, lighter. Instead, it felt like watching a slow collapse you couldn't stop, even if you wanted to. We were asked to give victim impact statements. I didn't know what to say at first. How do you explain fear that rewires your instincts? How your home stops feeling safe not because something happened, but because something almost did. When it was my turn, I told the truth. I talked about Laura calling me about the gas smell, about imagining what could have happened if she'd stayed inside longer, about how close we came to losing everything without knowing it. Diane didn't look at me once. She stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, hands folded too neatly in her lap. But when Laura spoke, something changed. Laura didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She said, "I wake up at night wondering if my house is trying to kill me." That was when Diane flinched. Her cousin took a plea deal. Forgery, filing false instruments, conspiracy. She cooperated fully. And that's how we learned the final piece. The part Diane never expected to come out. She hadn't targeted us randomly. She had targeted our house specifically. Because years ago, before we ever bought it, a real estate agent had told her, casually offhand, that if the lot were just a little wider, it would be one of the most valuable properties on the street. That comment stuck with her. She watched listings, waited, and when we moved in, no kids, dual income, quiet. She decided we were temporary, people who would settle, people who would panic, people she could outlast. She never expected resistance. She never expected documentation. And she definitely never expected cameras. The criminal sentencing came down on a gray Friday morning. Diane avoided prison time due to her age and lack of prior convictions, but the sentence was brutal in its own way. 5 years probation, mandatory restitution, permanent record for fraud-related offenses, and a court order barring her from any future property claims involving us or our address. She was also prohibited from selling her house without court approval until restitution was addressed. That meant one thing: she was trapped. Laura and I sat in our car afterward, hands resting between the seats. "It's over," she said. "Yes," I replied, but we both knew that wasn't entirely true, because endings don't erase what came before them. They just make space for what comes next. And what came next was quieter than revenge, but far more lasting, because in the end, Diane didn't lose because we fought harder. She lost because she believed she was entitled to something that was never hers. And the price of that belief was about to finish her story for good. A year passed, not all at once, not cleanly, but steadily, the way healing usually does, uneven, quiet, and mostly invisible from the outside. Diane's house sold eventually, not for what she wanted, not even close. Court approval came only after a buyer agreed to assume part of the lien structure, and the rest was carved out of the sale price like a penalty for believing rules didn't apply to you. She moved out on a rainy morning. No drama, no goodbye speeches, just a moving truck, a few boxes, and a woman who never once looked back at the house she had almost destroyed trying to claim something that wasn't hers. I didn't feel victory watching her leave. I felt tired. Laura and I changed after that. Not in the big, obvious ways people expect. We didn't sell the house. We didn't move away. We didn't suddenly become fearless. Instead, we became deliberate. We added cameras, not because we were scared, but because we were done being unprepared. We introduced ourselves properly to neighbors we barely knew before. We learned who kept records, who noticed details, who showed up when things got uncomfortable. Community stopped being a background word. It became armor. Sometimes people ask if we do anything differently. The honest answer? I would have trusted my instincts sooner. The first time Diane questioned the property line, I brushed it off to keep the peace. I told myself I didn't want to be that guy, the one who escalates, the one who makes things awkward. What I learned is this: people who rely on intimidation count on silence. They expect politeness to outweigh truth. We still live in the same house. The fence is still exactly where it was. The grass still grows unevenly along the edge. The driveway still curves just enough to make delivery drivers hesitate. But now, when I stand in the yard, I don't feel like it could be taken from me. Because ownership isn't just about deeds and surveys. It's about refusing to be pushed out of your own life. A few months ago, Laura and I planted a tree near the boundary line. Not as a marker, not as a statement, just because we wanted to. As we filled the hole, Laura said, "You know, she could have just lived her life." I nodded. "She chose not to," I said, and that was the clearest ending we were ever going to get. I don't know where Diane is now. I don't want to. What I do know is this: trying to steal someone's home didn't give her security. Trying to outmaneuver the truth didn't give her power. And trying to force an ending on her terms only guaranteed one she couldn't control. Some people believe karma is loud, explosive, instant. I don't think so anymore. I think karma is patient. It lets you keep going, and going, and going, until the bill arrives. And when it does, it's not negotiable. Not even close.